I wanted to talk to you some about the 50th anniversary of the Clearwater Festival, and what was it like to be there at the initial launch of this?
Well, the launch of the idea by Pete Seeger, it was really exciting, and it hit a lot of us just as a total surprise. I found out about it as a result of going to a Quaker meeting where Pete Seeger was singing that day, and I knew that I was going to get a chance to meet him, and so I took along a copy of Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451 because the song Turn, Turn, Turn was a hit back at that time, and it was being sung by the first folk rock group, the Byrds, and it was a direct quote from the book of Ecclesiastes, and Bradbury used almost exactly the same quote with the same meaning in Fahrenheit 451. But at any rate, after having had the chance to meet Pete Seeger and hear him sing songs like Little Boxes by Malvina Reynolds, who was an elderly folk song writer along the Hudson River, had the chance to talk to him about the Sloop Project, and I was very, very excited to hear about it. It was a great, great idea. The idea of going up and down the Hudson and setting up concerts as fundraisers and to introduce people to the idea of doing something locally all the way along the river to clean up the tremendous amount of pollution that was being poured into the river. And it was being poured by all these big factories.
What was the atmosphere at the start of all of it? Did you all realize just how big it was going to become and that you were going to be able to pull it all together as well as it did?
I think there was a lot of high hopes that came out almost immediately, simply because a lot of us that became involved were young people, and we were into the sort of things that the 60s was all about, which was change and idealism, and Pete Seeger had just the most perfect way of talking to that need in the young folks at that time. So I would just say we were all really excited, and it was just it's a huge memory for me to be able to remember those early days, because nobody knew for sure how it was going to go or how it was going to work, but we had a lot of confidence that something great was going to happen.
What was like one of your best experiences with Pete Seeger at the time of the Clearwater Project?
Well, I'll tell you, there's one that really stands out in my mind, and that was the time that we were introducing him to a folk musician that lived up near where we lived, up in the Hoosick Falls area. And he was going to be in one of the early concerts. This man, Joe Robertson, he was a member of the Robertson family, the same as Anna Mary Robertson, who was Grandma Moses. And he was an absolutely incredible fiddler. And they were going to meet together and practice, and originally it was going to be at Pete's house, but Toshi that day wanted to clean house, and so she sent Pete and his nephew Jeremy over to our house. So we spent the whole afternoon with Pete Seeger and Jeremy Seeger and Joe Robertson and Wilfred Robertson and my dad and mom and my girlfriend and me, having that be like a very small concert. But what was so swell about it, I remember now as I look back on it, is that all the time that they were singing and harmonizing and doing all the different things that were part of the practice, I remember thinking how Pete Seeger was delivering himself in that little group with the same exact largeness of expression that he used in all of his big concerts with maybe 20,000 people. So that was really an exciting memory. I'll tell you, I look back on it. In fact, here's a picture of what we looked like that day. We're sitting around Pete and Joe, and Pete was using that long neck banjo that he used, and as a matter of fact, he did a early version of the Big Muddy that day with a banjo. He usually did it with a guitar. So that was a chance to hear what was to become one of his most famous songs, the Big Muddy, that very day.
What would you say the main message that you carried with you from the whole project has been?
Well, Pete used to have a song that he sang called One Man's Hands, One man's hands can't tear a prison down. Two men's hands can't tear a prison down. But if 2 and 2 and 50 make 1,000,000, we'll see that day come round. And it used to be so great to hear that song. And really what's happened here with the Hudson River is like that. That's what I took from it. And I think of that song when I think about that kind of success. And I guess it could be applied to all the things we're struggling with. Pete always used to say that if you start small, he liked that saying, think globally but act locally. And I remember he said that you could only be an influence a certain distance. Like he said, he started there in Beacon and he might be an influence over to Newburgh. And of course, he seemed serious when he said it, but I know that there was an element of humor because the effect that his work had has gone all over the entire world. And the very fact of me being here down in Murfreesboro, and I write columns for the local newspaper, and I write about a lot of the same kinds of things that he was concerned about, and I've written about him a number of times and a lot of other things. And so just as I sort of moved away from that area up there that was my home area, but I took a lot of the sort of spirit that he had put into that area with me when I came here. And that's why it's so exciting to me now that up in New York State in June, this wonderful anniversary is taking place.